Hidden in the shadows of the booming Industrial Revolution, where elegance met innovation and cities sparkled with newfound prosperity, there was a grim underbelly, innocent hands, covered in soot, laboring in darkness and danger. Today we expose the harrowing truth about the child labor of chimney sweeps and shed light on a chapter of history many would rather forget. What drove families to sell their children into this dangerous line of work? How did these young souls navigate the chimneys that towered above the households of yesteryear? Before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that uncovers the mysterious, the unknown, and the deeply intriguing aspects of our shared past. And hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Today on History's Untold, Chimneys and Chains, Child Labor Exposed. In the bustling streets of 18th century London, amid the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the chatter of busy marketplaces, a peculiar and little-known profession thrived. It was a profession that most people took for granted, like the air they breathed or the roofs over their heads. We're diving into the story of child chimney sweeps, a profession wrapped in soot and clouded by the mists of history. Imagine for a moment the architectural landscape of 18th century England. Houses were adorned with chimneys that meandered like labyrinths, created to vent the numerous fireplaces that warmed each room. However, these complex designs also made chimneys difficult to clean. This led to an unlikely but very necessary solution: the employment of young children, some as young as 4 or 5, to climb up these narrow, dark chutes to sweep away the soot. The very first thing to consider is how these children found themselves in this line of work. The practice of children being sold into chimney sweeping was largely an outcome of the socio-economic conditions of the time. In 18th and early 19th century England and other parts of Europe, poverty was rampant, and social safety nets were virtually non-existent. Orphans or children from impoverished families were often the most vulnerable targets for this form of exploitation. Here's how the system generally worked. A man known as a master sweep would approach poor families, offering to apprentice their children. In return, the family might receive a small one-time payment, often less than £1. This sum was desperately needed by impoverished parents, and the master sweep would assure them that their children would be trained in a trade, provided with food and shelter, and would even receive a small wage. Given the economic desperation and the absence of alternative opportunities for education or apprenticeship, parents sometimes felt they had little choice but to agree to these terms. In other cases, orphans were literally sold by the orphanages to master sweeps in exchange for a fee. Without any family to look out for them, these children were particularly susceptible to being sold into this dangerous and grueling line of work. After the transaction was complete, the child would become an apprentice, though this term barely captures the exploitative conditions they would face. The master sweep had almost complete control over the child's life. Children would live in harsh conditions, often sleeping in cellars or other cramped spaces filled with soot. Their training was minimal, aimed merely at teaching them to climb chimneys, not for their overall development or well-being. Though the arrangement was framed as an apprenticeship, it was servitude in all but name. Children were bound to their masters until they reached adulthood, which meant that they had no way out of their miserable conditions unless they ran away, an act that could result in severe punishment if they were caught or were somehow released from their contract. The practice of using child chimney sweeps was a commercial enterprise. Master sweeps would contract out their child laborers to households with chimneys. Each successful climb would earn a small fee, which was pocketed by the master. The children might be given a pittance for their labor, but it was rarely enough to better their conditions or to buy their way out of the profession. Now, you may be wondering why such young children were recruited for such a perilous job. The answer is simple yet deeply unsettling. Their small and agile bodies were ideal for navigating the narrow, twisted pathways within chimneys. Young children were the perfect candidates for this dangerous task, at least from a purely mechanical standpoint. Let's pause for a moment to truly grasp the conditions these children faced. Picture crawling through a cramped, pitch-black tunnel filled with choking soot, unable to see, barely able to move, and struggling to breathe. Every movement had to be calculated, for there was the risk of getting stuck or falling, which happened more often than we'd like to think. And the soot wasn't just dirty. It was a carcinogen, leading to severe health issues like chimney sweeps cancer, a form of skin cancer that affected the scrotum. This doesn't even account for the respiratory problems and deformities caused by constantly climbing and twisting through narrow passages. Incredibly, society of the day largely turned a blind eye to these grim realities. Children were considered expendable labor, their plights often rationalized by the economic needs of the time. But like any story shrouded in darkness, there were glimmers of light. Social reformers began taking notice, armed with quills and an undying spirit to bring about change. Enter Lord Shaftesbury, one of the most prominent figures in the campaign against child labor. He was, to put it mildly, appalled at the inhumane conditions faced by these young chimney sweeps. Working diligently within the British Parliament, he advocated for laws to safeguard the well-being of these exploited children. The Chimney Sweepers and Chimneys Regulation Act of 1840, for example, aimed to regulate the industry and imposed age restrictions. However, it took the more effective Chimney Sweepers Act of 1875 to finally start putting an end to this form of child labor, mandating that all chimney sweeps had to be licensed and setting the minimum age for apprentices at 16. The child chimney sweeps of yesteryear might have climbed through the soot-filled tunnels of history, but they have not been forgotten. Their stories serve as somber reminders of the lengths to which human beings can go to exploit others when economic advantages are at stake. It also serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, showing how, against all odds, change is possible. It's fascinating, isn't it, to unearth these forgotten corners of history? While the occupation of child chimney sweeps has long been swept away, the footprints they left behind serve as haunting reminders of a not-so-distant past. It emphasizes the importance of continued vigilance in safeguarding human rights, especially those of children, as we continue to write new chapters in our shared history. So the next time you look up at a chimney, consider the invisible hands that once toiled to keep the hearths burning. And remember that every brick and mortar of history has a story to tell. Some darker than others, but all crucial in shaping the world as we know it today. Thanks for tuning in on History's Untold. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to journey further into the fascinating corners of history, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we unearth another incredible story. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring, because history is filled with stories that are just waiting to be told. See you in the next episode.